In June of 1996, the International Transpersonal Association held a conference of participants from all over the world in the rubber trading city of Manaus, Brazil, in the central Amazon. Following the conference, over 40 participants and leaders embarked on a memorable journey of 1,000 miles to the village of Mapiá in the Rio Branco district, not far from the eastern flank of the Andes and the headwaters of the Amazon. Our goal was to visit a utopian community whose vision was based on spiritual principles and whose people lived in a sustainable, ecologically grounded way in the largest forest on Earth. This video tells the story of what we found and just a little about the origins of an indigenous Amazonian spiritual tradition, the Santo Daime movement.
In order to get to Mapiá from Manaus, we had to travel 1,000 miles in a southwesterly direction. First, we traveled by a commercial jet to Rio Branco, then by a smaller plane to Boca do Acre, or mouth of the Acre River. From Boca, we would travel, some of our party by fast boats that would take them to a place called the Farm, partway up the Igarape-Mapiá, where they would change for dugout canoes fit to travel up the upper portions of the river. Some went on dugouts capable of going up the Mapiá all the way, a journey which takes 13 hours in good weather.
Here we are, the beginning of our journey. It's almost 8 o'clock in the morning. We'll see what comes next.
So we are all here going to Rio Branco this first day of our trip, the Wisdom of the Serpent. We are on our way to Mapiá to drink some daime and to see the padrinhos and madrinhas over there.
So I've got my wildlife book along, and I'm going to pass this around. It's a great book about Amazon wildlife, ecological preserves, and that kind of thing. Okay?
Go!
Now I see why you know that.
The Hotel Floresta, our point of departure and return from the wilds of the Amazon.
Vai aprender, né? Daqui a pouco todo mundo fala inglês. Todo mundo fala português.
We left the hotel in the pre-dawn light and saw our first Amazon sunrise on the Rio Purus. Some traveled in much slower, more perilous boats, others in faster ones called voadeiras. Entering the Igarape-Mapiá, Padrinho Sebastião, Mapiá's founder, chose to put his second visionary community where it could not later be displaced by industrial interests, as it had at the earlier site, Rio de Oro. We saw what we were told was a boatload of the ayahuasca, or Banisteriopsis vine, being transported on the river.
The Farm is a stopover point, where some changed to the dugouts able to ply the river. The Farm contributes produce to the Mapiá community. Arrival at last. For some boats, the journey had taken 10, for others, 13 hours.
After arrival, we scheduled a meeting with Alex Polari. He recounted the history of the founding of Mapia and the origins of the Santo Daime religion.
O Padrinho Sebastião carried a exile, prayer, and 60 other men came here and ported where we are ported by the big yellow house and a region of Acre there that has this battalion, this company.
In the mid-1920s, Raimundo Irineu Serra, a rubber tapper and border guard of African-Brazilian descent, was first introduced to the use of the ayahuasca by the Indians of Bolivia. In a vision, a woman in the moon appeared to him and told him to go alone to the forest to drink the sacred tea for a week. He did so, and to his astonishment, received instructions in the founding of a new religion to be called the Santo Daime, or Holy Petition. The woman revealed herself as an aspect of the Virgin Mary and offered to be his patroness and guide. The ayahuasca was now called Daime, as in give me courage, give me love, give me strength. Irineu returned to Rio Branco, his place of origin, and by the 1930s had founded the Santo Daime religion.
The ayahuasca is one of the few entheogens in the whole world which is a combination of two dissimilar plants. These plants are the jagube vine, or Banisteriopsis caapi, a jungle liana, and the chacruna, or Psychotria viridis, a leafy plant in the coffee family. In the Daime tradition, the vine is regarded as male, and its preparation is the province of the men. The leaf, considered female, is the province of the woman.
When the two plants are combined, a marriage of sorts is envisioned. All preparations are done in a sacred manner, in a space set apart from the rest of the community. The process is called a fechio and goes on for several days at recurrent times in the community calendar.
Often the entire community participates in the fechio, weaving prayers and songs into the process. The result of this remarkable alchemy is the potent drink called daime. The beija-flor, the amazing Amazonian hummingbird, is often shown with Mestre Irineu. He is considered to be the divine messenger in the Daime tradition, and many beautiful hymns are sung to the beija-flor. In the 1960s, a man who was a canoe maker, but also a professional trance medium and healer, came to Mestre Irineu to himself receive healing from a deadly liver cancer. His name was Sebastião Mota de Melo, and he was completely healed through the Daime ceremonies conducted by Mestre Irineu. Sebastião became a convert and one of the foremost disciples of Mestre Irineu. When Mestre Irineu died in 1971, the church divided into three branches, and the one led by Sebastião Mota de Melo, now called Padrinho, or Godfather, founded a community at Rio de Ouro, or River of Gold. They had very little in the way of economic resources, as the members of the community came from the poor and disenfranchised classes of rural Brazilian society. Industrial and political forces drove the community to relocate once again. This time the Queen of the Forest told Padrinho to establish the community deep in the rainforest, up a small river, the Igarape Mapia, where they could live in sustainable harmony with the forest and never be displaced again. It was not an easy thing to move an entire community to a remote location deep in the Amazon forest. It took over a year to move their possessions by canoe and by hand to the new site.
At first, Padrinho and a couple of dozen men arrived at the site and began to build. They were gradually joined by others, and within a few years the families, women and children, began to arrive. The Daime has a very strong family basis. Madrinha Rita was Pedrinho Sebastião's wife and lifetime companion. She lives to this day in the village of Mapiá.
Pedrinho Sebastião Mota de Melo died in January of 1990. He was succeeded by his son, Alfredo Gregorio de Melo, as the spiritual leader of the Daime tradition, which has its center in Mapiá. Pedrinho Sebastião's tomb is a shrine which all worshippers pass on their way into the church. From the moment one crosses the beautiful inlaid hardwood star on the floor, the shrine holds an indescribable atmosphere of peace and sanctity. Alex Polari de Alverga was a political dissident during the years of the military junta in Brazil. In all, he spent 9 years in prison. His release was in part obtained through the action of Amnesty International and the political changeover to a democratic government. After his release, he embarked on a spiritual search that led him to the Colonia 5.000, the colony of 5,000 in Acre, Brazil, in the late 1970s. He participated in the Daime rituals and was initiated by Pedrinho Sebastião, who became his spiritual teacher. He was one of a new generation of urban and university-trained intellectuals to be attracted to the Daime tradition. He founded one of the major Daime centers in Serra de Montanha, south of Rio, and currently resides in and is recognized as one of the spiritual leaders of the community at Mapiá.
In some of the ceremonies at High Holy Days, there are special costumes. The women are dressed as queens, after the Queen of Heaven. Women in Mapiá seem to enjoy full equality and respect. Joseph Campbell had always told us, when you visit a community for the first time, look at the largest or the tallest building, and you will determine its informing mythology. In Mapiá, there is no question. The great star-shaped church on its hill can hold as many as 600 people on the High Holy Days. It is surrounded by smaller shrines, picnic areas, and beautiful gardens. The church is fashioned of the local hardwoods of the forest, teak, mahogany, ebony. The central symbol of the vine wrapped around the axis of the world refers to the Daime belief that Christ has returned to earth through the vine. I am the vine, and ye are the branches. The vine reaches to all parts of the cosmos, the sun, moon, and stars. The cross with the doubled crosspiece refers to the fact that while Christ sacrificed himself for our sins, we each, in our own way and in our own lives, repeat the same journey.
We had heard tales of the church at Mapiá, lit up at night like an interstellar craft from a different world. Daime works are almost always done at night. We were about to experience our first one in the great church at Mapiá. The Daime is served at the beginning of the ceremony with a separate line for the men and for the women. The Padrino regulates the amount depending upon his intuitive estimate of what each participant can handle. The Daime might be served several times during a ceremony depending upon the length of the service. Alex Polari says the Daime is a sacrament, a vehicle for the force, the divine being that is present in the rainforest and all creation. The effects of the Daime may vary from one person to another, and they often relate to the level of one's apprenticeship with the Daime. It is common for initiates to have visions of animals such as snakes or leopards, similar to those experienced in indigenous psychotropic traditions. Participants may also have vision of friends and relatives, or experience insights into their past lives and into their psyches. Padrino Alfredo, son of Pedrinho Sebastião and the spiritual leader of the community of Mapiá. A healing ceremony, a kura, was scheduled for the first night. We needed one because earlier that day a high staircase had crashed to the ground with about 15 members of our party. Vincent Parmentola was pinned beneath, and we feared he was paralyzed. But he chose to be carried into the church that night. Miraculously, by the end of the ceremony, he had joined the dancing.
I was very uncomfortable about the whole thing. And by the following morning, when I woke up, I was quite grumpy. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I was grumpy at everything and everyone. And so after breakfast, the group gathered, and we were going to take a tour of Mapia community. And the first house on the way was the Madalena's house. And I'd heard so much about the Madalena, you might say the, honorary matron of the community. So there's a lot of honor attached to her place and to her. Approaching the house, there was a large flight of wooden steps. And since both of my cameras had stopped working, I decided, well, I'm going to sit as close to the Madalena as I could. And if I could hear well, because the group was constantly talking. I had about 20 conversations going at the same time. Part of my annoyance. And so I sat at the very top step, right to be near her. And just as she came out, she knelt over or bent over to extend her hand, and I kissed her hand. She did something so sweet. She turned my hand and kissed my hand. And I just felt like it was a blessing. And it was at that point I became aware of the structure was swaying. And slowly, like in slow motion, the entire stairway lowered itself with about 15 of us sitting on this stairway, 15 or 20. And I'm at the top step. By the time that stairway lowered down to the ground, I was pinned under the stairway. And I didn't know whether I had broken my back or whether I had fractured something. I had no idea. All I knew is I was in tremendous pain. I've never experienced this pain in my life. Every muscle of my back was in spasm. Fortunately, Steve Larson was sitting there, and he was cradling me. I couldn't be moved. I could barely be touched. And Steve, with his use of acupressure, did everything he could to make me comfortable and to help me breathing, make sure I was breathing, keep me from getting too far out panic-wise, because I was panicking. And the thought that kept going through my head constantly was, I just don't want to be a cripple. I don't want to be. Please, Lord, do not make me a cripple. Take my life, but don't let me live as a cripple. That's all I prayed for. But I did look forward very much to the ayahuasca ceremony. In my mind, at that point, I was convinced that the ayahuasca would heal anything. I was that convinced of it. So with that positive attitude, they carried me into the temple that night for the ceremony. People of the community were nice enough to arrange a healing ceremony for us, which meant certain healing songs, certain types of music, not much movement. We were sitting. They had carried in a very comfortable couch for me, a upholstered couch. They did everything they could to make me comfortable. And I took the ayahuasca like everyone else, bitter, as they say and write about it, very bitter. And I would still probably within about 35 or 45 minutes, I could feel the effects of the ayahuasca, which meant running to the bathroom. That happened at least 3 times, where I was helped outside and discharged myself, came back, and once you puke it out, the head gets clear. And so I was able then to just lay back and enjoy the ceremony. which went, I would say, about 5 hours. One of the amazing things about the ayahuasca experience, remembering that I was in such terrible pain and discomfort, is the ayahuasca starts to talk to you. I swear it has a conscience, this plant. And all throughout the following hours, this voice, inner voice, guided me as to what to do to relieve the pain, how to stretch my legs, where to stretch, when to do the breathing, to remind me to do the breathing. And then I had the opportunity to ask him questions like, why did this happen, and so forth. How bad is the damage? That definitely was uppermost in my mind. How bad is the damage? And the answer I got back is that I didn't break anything, that I had suffered a severe strain, but I had broken nothing, and that I would mend in time, in not too long a time. I would mend. So that was a comfort, in spite of the pain. The reason for it, I was told, was to learn compassion. Can't do healing work without being a compassionate person. And even though I thought I was, it's when this accident happened, I realized that I was lacking in compassion. I felt it was an initiation. I felt the entire ayahuasca experience was, for me, an initiation. To move me through certain realms of development into the next realm.
Estamos aqui nessa missão, aguardando todos os irmãos que vêm do estrangeiro, desse mundo, meu Deus, nos visitar, conhecer, aprender e levar de nós boas novas para expandir pelo mundo aí afora dessa nossa missão espiritual, Santo Daime. Espero mais gente chegar aqui, muita alegria, como todos vocês aqui estão, satisfeitos, né? Eu vi muito prazer de vocês essa noite no trabalho, muita alegria, sabe? Muito sofrimento também, mas um sofrimento muito satisfeito, né? Sempre o Daime tem essas coisas que, quando a gente entra nele, assim, às vezes pela primeira vez, a matéria está muito cheia de coisa e ele é um ser muito puro, muita pureza. Então, quando penetra dentro do eu, aí ele vai corrigir o que tem, o que agrada, o que não agrada, e o que não serve ele vai tirando, botando para fora para deixar justamente o aparelho dele, que ele é o eu superior de cada um, limpo, bonito, brilhando na terra e no céu.
While the nights were spent in Daime works, during the day we were often able to explore the environment and see just what kind of a place we were in. There are many varieties of parrots. Most of our group was billeted in people's homes, which were simple but beautiful. With our large group, we wondered how these people were going to be able to feed us. We were fed in a little canteen. The food was simple but wholesome. We had 13 medical doctors on our trip, and we were all eager to see Mapia's health care clinic. Many of us had brought medicines to give to this remote community, but we found an already well-functioning clinic with allopathic medicines such as antiseptics and antibiotics, but also homeopathy skillfully used, and indigenous jungle remedies. They can always use more medicines, though, because of the vast spectrums of illnesses they must treat. A young man with leprosy untreated for several years. Often people from the outlying areas in the forest come to Mapia with serious illnesses or in times of need, such as during recent floods that left people homeless in the region. Mapia serves 19 other communities in this way. But we saw some very healthy people in Mapia, clear skin and bright eyes. It may also have to do with the blood alkalinizing effect of the daime and its fungicidal and antibacterial qualities.
People also bring children from outlying areas to be educated in Mapia. Even with their limited resources, they have the best schools and the greatest concentration in this section of the rainforest of university-educated and professionally trained people. Recently, children from the Mapia school took a nationally administered equivalency exam and performed very well. Some visitors had expressed concern about the participation of the children in the daime ceremonies, but the ones we saw were bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and certainly seemed happy and healthy.
During the time of our visit, a fichio, or making, was going on in Mapia, and some of our members were able to participate in the making of the daime. It was a very demanding and yet empowering experience, as they described it.
One of the high points of our journey was a daime ceremony in the forest. We walked several miles on a comfortable path, but with the extraordinary feeling of the forest closing around us. During the ceremony, one woman was entered by a spirit of the forest and began howling. It was an unforgettable scene that will live on in our memories.
At last it was time to take our leave of Mapia and commence the long journey back to the Hotel Floresta. did seem to see Boca do Acre with new eyes. There was a radiance and an excitement that had not been there before in our participants.
The journey up the river was just amazing. It was really beautiful, lots of things to look at, and it really helped to focus my mind. I was sitting at the front most of the way, and it just made me realise just how on life's journey there are so many beautiful things to see, and every moment has new blessings, so there's no need to there's no need to hang on to old ones.
I've had a tremendous adventure. Inside, outside, all around the town side. I mean, it just hasn't stopped. And I'm very grateful to the town of Mafia for being so good to us.
When I was an English teacher, I taught Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, which is about a pilgrimage in England, and every night they stop and tell stories, and some of them quite bawdy. But here we came from all different ways to take this journey, and we come back spiritually enriched.
I feel like I've opened and grown on many levels. For me, it was primarily heart work that it opened up. It seemed to open up this a level of depth of understanding that I hadn't quite appreciated before, and the real connection to earth and nature. As far as the bottom line was, what I got from the experience, what I got from the dying message was that the truth that I have is there. It's there within me. It's always been there, and I don't need to look for an exterior way to find it. If I just go through my journey within, into my heart, my soul, that the truth is there. It's always been there. I guess I've known that, but it's nice to get a little bit of a validation that's there.
Padrinho Valdeci, the oldest son of Padrinho Sebastião, had accompanied us in the entire journey to Mapia and back.
No mundo inteiro, como falou o mestre Ireneu, que o mundo inteiro tem que ser doutrinado através do Santo Daime, aí eu acredito que vai chegar mesmo. Como por esse pouco tempo já tenho visto muito chegando aí de quase todos os lugares do país. E mais é só, esperamos que o sol nos cumpra para sempre.
What can I never knew things like that existed, and now I believe in spirits, and I think that they have a lot of power to heal there.
So basically what I think it is in the Daime is its whole experience of Mafia and the way of life, the ritual and the grounding and the energy. I came without actually having done any drugs at all, with some sort of immersion, so I was actually concerned about the Daime. And when I realized that the Chio, after 4 days there and these experiences, is the Daime is sacred because of the context in which it is.
I met a group of people that do service in a way that I never even knew service was possible of doing. And here I thought I'd done service in my life. So that's the main thing I'm taking home from the trip, is a new way of being in the world that I'm hoping I can bring forth from myself.
My experience there, I would say, is really transforming, no less. And my experience with the Daime in particular were very deep, very intense. Lots of insights, revelations, teaching that perhaps would have taken me so much time to achieve.
It's been an absolutely phenomenal trip. One of the things that I have experienced here is letting go over and over again of expectations, structures, forms. Everything dissolves and then is reborn again, so that many of the plans that we've made as we've gone through this trip have been changed at the last minute because of circumstances beyond our control. And for me, that's been a very important learning.
It's wonderful for me to have touched so many spirits and to be touched by them. And the word that came to me when Stephen said a word is the word forever.
For me, it was a very challenging experience. You know, kind of a lonely odyssey, which it wasn't lonely in a social sense. We had wonderful people and great companionship and much joy among ourselves. Lonely in the sense that it was a journey both deep into the jungle and deep into myself. And I found that the further I went from civilization, the more I was challenged to be responsible for myself.
When I was in the forest, I asked myself a question: why did Robin and Stephen and Madeline take something like this on? Such a difficult task. All these undisciplined guys with different agendas getting together and getting on this difficult journey. And I had this, as soon as I asked Amy this question, this huge Viking ship emerged 1,000 years ago when they were going on a trip on these uncharted waters and an Atlantic, northern and southern, going from place to place without maps, without any clear directions, and getting back safely like we did.
Returning to Rio de Janeiro, the group tasted again the comforts of civilization. But our quest for the miraculous had not diminished. At the ITA conference in Manaus, many of the participants had seen a film by David Sonnenschein about the mysterious Dr. Fritz, a spiritual or psychic surgeon who was once a German field surgeon in World War I. He had reappeared 5 times in different vehicles since his first manifestation in Zé Arrigo in the 1960s, followed by 4 others, culminating in his current host, Rubens Faria, a computer programmer living in Rio. David responded cordially and efficiently. We would visit Dr. Fritz the following day.
The following day, the bus brought our group further and further into one of the most dilapidated sections of Rio. The driver was amazed at where these 40 crazy Yankees were going. We finally arrived at a vast and ruinous warehouse. Outside, there were vendors on the street selling food and cold drinks. Inside, people stood patiently in long queues awaiting treatment.
We asked some of these people, "Why do you visit with Dr. Fritz?" They said, "Because he is one of us, because he helps us, because he only accepts donations, he accepts what we give him."
They said I had cancer, but couldn't operate, because this would shorten my life. But I felt it was more important to follow my faith.
I have femoral arthritis from an accident 16 years ago. Because of the pain, I went to Dr. Fritz. He operated, and it's now totally improved.
Do this. Now this. You're fine now.
Dr. Fritz moves with blinding speed, treating as many as 1,000 patients in a day. He speaks 5 languages, while Rubens speaks only Portuguese fluently. Our medical doctors were especially interested to see the operations he performed at very close hand. Some of us had peculiar experiences in his presence. Some heard him talk as if telepathically. Others were overcome with emotions while in his presence. Sometimes it seems as if people are not themselves. Sometimes it's somebody, you can go up to somebody in our society and say, "You don't seem like yourself today."
well then who are you? And so it's the hollow self theory, the idea that we may become inhabited by an energic, a subtle energy field that is not ourselves. And so then if we're not ourselves, who are we? And that's the abiding question. Who are we?
I felt he talked as if in my mind. Certainly I understood him. He asked me if I wanted him to operate right then on my blind left eye. I wasn't ready. Then he turned to Guillerme, who said yes. The next moment there was a scalpel in Guillerme's eye, and a few moments later it was bandaged. He wasn't allowed to take the bandage off for 24 hours, and he was very weak in the knees. But he told us later that his vision was improved by the spontaneous operation.
You are seeing my mission. This is my mission. You are seeing the act. But the great say, the really important point is open the mind, open the soul. This is my really mission. The operation act, it's very simple. Open the mind and the soul, it's very difficult.
I think that this phenomenon, Dr. Fritz, is really something much more than just healing. He's trying to show something that people still aren't grasping because they get attracted just to the healing. Either they get attracted or skeptical, saying, look, this is impossible, this can't be healed. There have been unheard of cases like, look, here's the exam, there's no more tumor. Impossible, they say, the exam must be wrong. So they do the exam 40 times, and 40 times it says the same thing, it's cured. And they continue to be skeptical. There's a difference between being a rational skeptic and a stupid skeptic. The stupid one doesn't accept a new concept, new philosophy, new way of thinking. That's the stupid skeptic. The rational skeptic searches to the limit for the foundation of the technique that's occurring, to find where there really is an effect happening.
I'm a modern 20th century person, and I have my own skepticism about psychic surgery. Even having seen very convincing videos and talked to people, but actually having been in his presence is amazing. And it's a feeling rather than a seeing, but the seeing and the feeling go together. So I'm much more persuaded that something absolutely real is going on, and that what we take as ordinary existence is an illusion.
It's my last time here. It's my last time here. It's an incredible opportunity.
Dr. Fritz lectures the people he works on to pray while they are waiting, to align themselves with the Holy Spirit, and to think of others before themselves. All in all, it was a profound and unforgettable experience to be in the presence of this amazing man.
After a final community circle, we bade farewell to each other, and many of us to Brazil. Many of us felt deeply bonded, having endured these life-transforming adventures together.
The company disbanded. Robin, Stephen, and Merlin traveled to Bahia with Jeremy Waletsky to observe the trance dances of Umbanda. During this time, a resolve formed in Merlin to be treated by Dr. Fritz for his foot injury. He had been in a climbing accident a couple of years before and had 3 operations at a New York hospital. But the bone spurs kept growing back. He was on crutches during much of our time in the Amazon.
When we left for Brazil, I was still using crutches at first in the beginning, and then a cane, and occasionally I would overtax myself, and throughout the whole process, somewhere along the line, I avulsed my Achilles to about 30%, so there was a significant tear in the Achilles. And then on the outside of my heel, where the main contacting bone was, because it was an abnormal shape to the bone spurs began to grow off of one side of my foot. And this would interfere with any kind of shoe I would try to wear or any walking on hard surfaces or anything like this. It was a constant reminder every step that I was crippled. And So these were the main complaints that I had. This bony spur on the very bottom of my foot, which was contacting the ground in an uncomfortable way. A bony spur on the side of my foot, which was continuing to grow and was the most painful point of complaint that I had. And then my slightly avulsed Achilles. So the opportunity to see Dr. Fritz came. I had seen a trailer of him doing very intense, invasive operations on people, and they were seemingly experiencing no pain or even fear under a lot of circumstances that I saw. And when we went to visit the place, we entered a courtyard, an outside courtyard with walls and no ceiling, and there were probably 800 people there. There had just been a television story done on Dr. Fritz, and so he was experiencing a boom in a number of people coming to see him. And they were just everywhere, and there were people with leprosy and people missing parts of their bodies and people experiencing cancers and diseases of various kinds that showed on them and diseases that just showed in their faces. And my first day there, I spent 8 hours waiting and observing people going in and out of the treating rooms in the back, and the whole experience of coming into this courtyard and seeing how much suffering was there was very humbling for me. I had been very consumed with my own injury. At least when it would come up, it would be very consuming for me and difficult to get a perspective on the kind of the world. It was sort of normal people and me. And I've been extremely active my whole life and made my body my primary tool of perception and enjoyment and understanding the world through my body. And so this has been very isolating, sitting with this. However, to be in this room with these other people and seeing their suffering, and to hear the words that Fritz would come out and share with everyone periodically, like he said to people, think of others. The first day that I was there for probably 8 hours, and at the end of the day I was brought back into a chamber beyond the main chambers where everyone was being treated, and he asked me a few questions in very fluent English, and then I had directed him to the 3 points on my foot, the bottom of the bone spur on the side, and the Achilles tear. And he gave me 3 injections of this strange liquid that he has in his syringes. I felt no pain and even thought perhaps that he hadn't actually quite punctured the skin with the injection, but maybe even just placed it in the gauze. Didn't shake my faith or anything. It's just interesting to note. And then he sent me home and said, come back tomorrow. And so I went home, and I didn't notice any particular physical changes, although my whole mental state was slowly gearing itself toward this final meeting, which he assured me would be the next day. I returned to the same scene, 800 to 1,000 people in an enormous courtyard of all varying degrees of ailments and pain all around me. I spent the day collecting my thoughts, meditating, crouching in various dirty corners, and watching the entire process go on. Around 6 hours into the day, I was allowed back further into another room where there was probably 400 or 500 people gathered, and they were set up in rows, maybe 5 or 6 rows, or even more, 8 rows, and lined up. And Rubens Faria and his assistants were wheeling a cart back up and down the front of the row with syringes and scalpels and hemostats and various implements on the cart. He would stop at each person at the front of the row, give them an injection, maybe say a quick word, and then occasionally someone with a much more serious ailment would come, and he would maybe step them away from the crowd of people, still in the front of this whole room of people. And I began to feel that not only was what he, as he himself says, not only was what he was doing an act of the physical that was representing something that was happening on the spiritual, but the whole enactment of the entire room had something to do with this process that he was unfolding there. There was belief being built in the room. He had me sitting on a table facing this way, and my foot was at a side angle, And he took a scalpel and placed it right against where the bone spur was, kind of a marble-sized bone spur on my foot. And he took a hemostat and started tapping down this. Now, at this moment, I'm sitting here watching him do this. I'm thinking, now this is going to be the great moment in which I'm going to realize the impermanence of flesh and the entry of supernatural into my life. You know, this is going to be the real moment. And I'm watching him cut, and I see blood start to emerge, and I realize that actually it was hurting me intensely. And the heat and kind of rose up in my stomach in the way it does when you get a little shocky, and I was unable to sit here and observe him doing this. I had to turn my body more upright so that I could breathe more correctly, and I was sweating and turned a little cold and clammy, so I needed to just kind of make myself more comfortable. And as I turned like this away from him, my face came up against the wall where written right in front of me was the words Permanencia Mirassau, or permanent prayer, total prayer. And this is what people had been saying throughout the Daime experience, and this is what the assistants to Dr. Fritz and he himself had been saying throughout the whole thing, was concentration, prayer, focus. And that was the perfect thing for me to see in that moment, because I was able to open something up in my head and maybe in my heart also. And I was aware then in that moment of what I perceive as the process that was going on in the room, which seemed to be multi-leveled. There were many people and all their energies and all their worldly events kind of hovering around their mind and their heart and their bodies, and they were here to be healed. And there was Dr. Fritz in the center of it, focusing the energy, and then all around him, coming down in a kind of a cone or a funnel of energy, was powerful, powerful angelic forces and energies. And I kind of, and in that moment, for me, a true visionary moment for me, I saw them as almost transparent, black and white, winged, floating beings. And I was aware that I was seeing into something that I was grasping to give form to, but that there was something real there, and that there was something otherworldly occurring, and even penetrating this world. The only other experience I've ever had that really was truly a real experience on this level had been a few weeks before in the jungle at Mapia. I had been taking Daime for a few weeks, maybe 10 times over those few weeks, and each time had been an experience of tremendous perseverance and uncomfortableness and nausea and no visions, no wild animals or jungle scenes or visitations from ancestral beings. None of the people who were in the church singing and praying that night really knew that I was going to be popping up in their faces with this camera, which was also kind of new work for me. So the hackles on my neck were raising as I walked down the women's side between the older women and the younger women, shining this technological piece of equipment into the face of this spiritual experience. And as I reached the center of the circle, teetering a little, as I quite often did, I have to apologize for the shakiness of the camera, my foot was always an issue, and I would stand on one foot and try to get as solid as I could. I went to bring the camera to bear in the center of the circle, and a kind of a wind lifted up through my legs and through my pants, and a real physical sensation of a wind lifted, and it held me poised there, and everything just went still. And all around the focus of the eye of the camera was the vision of what was happening in the church, and that was that same funneling in of otherworldly energies and disincorporated bodies of a very angelic and benign, sort of helpful sort, and just a whole world of activity that I could just barely get a piece of with my limited experience in life and my grasp of the supernatural. So that was what I experienced while he was cutting into me, was that same energy of a vortex of energy, perhaps going up this way and down this way, or just very powerful experience.
The next day Merlin woke and said he felt uncommonly good. He went down to the granite escarpments of Rio to watch the climbing. The Brazilian climbers invited him to tie into the rope, and he found himself saying yes. He climbed every climb they put him on, and when he returned to the United States the following week, he put away his crutches for good.
Since that time, he hikes with heavy packs, plays judo, and climbs. Being free of the bone spurs that plagued him until the Dr. Fritz operations has freed him from terrible pain. But he says the most amazing transformation is in his spirit. He feels he has had an inner renewal since coming in contact with Dr. Fritz, and will always be grateful to him.
On 2.5 years of reflection, our trip to Brazil still seems full of miracles and healings. Contact with the spirits in a land where the veil between the ordinary and the spiritual seems so much thinner. But we will always remember the brave and beautiful people of the rainforest who shared their vision of a new world of possibility with all of us. To them we say, muito obrigado. Paz e harmonia abençoe de Deus esteja com todos. Many thanks. May the peace and harmony of God be with you all.